Hey, it's your boy back again, man. I guess, Wi-Fi. I mean, I got to be in Wi-Fi to get a constant connection. It's really hard to drive because you hit these pockets and stuff like that. But anyways, what I was talking about, how they use Kanye West, man. Kanye West is, he was a perfect person to kind of, diminish the stigma of the MAGA hat. The MAGA hat it had a huge stigma towards it, and I, to tell you the truth, I question if Kanye is doing it unknowingly. Maybe that's part of his personality quirk, where he does things that's unknowingly. Maybe Candace Owen, those type of people are doing that shit unknowingly. But what I've been seeing, man, is like an increase of black YouTubers, going on this Kanye thing, which makes sense to me because there's the big black nerd culture. You gotta think about it, man. The last 20 years, the black middle class has grown exponentially. The last 40 years probably has grown exponentially. And then you have a lot of single mothers out there. They got college degrees, they got 2 jobs. A lot of according to what they tell you, a lot of people don't really realize that a lot of the black people are doing exceptionally well compared to what they were 30, 40 years ago. You have the black middle class, and you have a lot of offspring with the black middle class. I don't care if your daddy was a D-boy, that reformed his life. He's probably part of the black middle class, got his job together, and made his mistakes early in life. But a lot of those kids, they some of them, grow up in the suburbs. A lot of them grow up in the suburbs, like Kanye and all that stuff. And they have like kind of the mentality that they don't really see systematic racism because they've been able to reach a level of success in their life, and they don't really see systematic racism. A person like me, I grew up in the projects, and fortunately I made it out. I went to school. I got 2 master's degrees. I got a bachelor's degree. I have securities licenses, and I've been able to hold down jobs, pretty good paying jobs. But my potential has been kind of capped because of systematic racism. To me it is. Like when I have interviews, sometimes I've had a couple of interviews in the past where I kind of almost knew that I wasn't going to get it no matter how much. Either I had to act like a Candace Owen, or I had to act like a Kanye West, just straight buffoonery, coonery, kissing ass, bootlicking, because a lot of people tell me that there's a certain presence that I give off. I'm not bragging about myself, but I'm very assertive, and assertive. A lot of times, you come off like militant or too pro-black or whatever, and whenever anybody gets a sense of that shit, they already put it. They don't even. And there was a whole bunch of hurdles I had to get across, and I was like, he probably saw the relief on my face. But the guy was, I think he was like from, I don't know, he wasn't like an African American. Either me, I'm not an African American, but I grew up in African American culture. I was a first generation, American and whatever. So that's my culture. But I had a sense of release in my face. Like, you know what, this is a brother. And then I heard his accent. He had like a Jamaican accent. And all of a sudden, man, during the interview, he just started pressing me, man. He started pressing me, and I'm going over my credentials, and then I'm saying, oh, I got a master's degree, blah, blah, blah. And he was scrutinizing that, and he was like, oh, everybody got a master's degree. Kind of almost like, shitting on it. But that's the thing, he basically shit on it. But anyways, he was very adversarial with me during the interview. I ended up getting a job, and it was because it was, the banking industry was going through a lot of stuff, so they had to hire a couple of people. So the job that I interviewed for, I did not get hired for, but because they needed an influx of bankers, I ended up getting hired, and just by chance. But I done exceptionally well ever since that. I met him a couple of, he turned out to be a pretty good guy, but he was very adversarial towards me. Because I played football in college. He kind of almost stereotyped me as like this dumb jock or whatever. But you know, but a lot of those kids, like those kids, like these generation, those millennial kids, they get fooled into thinking that systematic racism does not exist. Systematic racism does exist. It does exist, and it's so, and now it's even more refined. The pathway to prison is even more refined, and you just don't say. I mean, I did not even know I was in a pathway to prison because Dr. Umar Johnson, shout out to him, man. They had me diagnosed as emotionally handicapped when I think I was in middle school. And I was a kid that, I had my father around, I had my mother around, maybe they didn't give me the attention. I was a class clown. I was always like, instigating stuff in class, making fun of the teacher, laughing, and all kinds of stuff. And, I had behavioral issues. I had real behavioral issues, which I thought, that can be. I mean, there was a whole bunch of different ways to fix it, and one of the things that fixed it for me was sports. Being a part of sports, being a part of something that right there went a long way in fixing a lot of my behavioral issues. But anyways, they had me, basically on the pathway to prison. I mean, even though I wasn't dumb or slow or whatever, they had me like, I was 3 grades back, 4 grades back on the level of work that they were giving me. And some of the work that they gave me, I was like, you got to be kidding me. You had to be kidding me. But I ended up getting up out of there using because my parents didn't speak English well. They didn't go in the American system. They were Haitian. They all they cared about is putting food on the table in the house over your, clothes on our back and putting a roof over our heads. So that was their main thing, and they participated in school and stuff like that. So I mean, that was all going on, what I'm saying? And I started getting in trouble. I started getting a lot of trouble, all through middle school, elementary school. I was, king. I mean, to me, it was funny. I was the guy that knows that, goes in there and disrupts the class. I was very disruptive. But I think the putting me on medicine, I mean, they didn't try that shit, but diagnosing me, I think right there is that stigma alone kind of almost makes kids live up to their reputation. And I don't even know why in schools, and especially in public schools, and they have a disastrous rate. When you see the kids that they put in these programs like, learning disability, ADHD diagnosis, 90% of those kids are going to fail. Like if I'm thinking of all the kids that I grew up with that were so it's bad, it's horrible. And the thing is, most of those kids are Spanish, and very few are white. And I'm like thinking to myself, if you have a majority white school, why the hell that all these special programs and shit like that have very few of them, like 1 or 2, and then you have like 10 blacks, 10 Spanish kids, if there's no such thing as systematic racism? I mean, come on, man. Like, some of these, I mean, there's white kids that were in my mix. Come on, man. We know what it is, but a lot of those kids are not conscious. I don't know what the school system is like that, but there's so many covert things that are happening that, and because like a Donald Trump is able to connect, to people through social media, they think that, he's a cool guy, or, I mean, I don't know, whatever. But anyways, they